Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, please? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight will be the Revere Zoning Subcommittee meeting. For those on the zoning subcommittee, I'd like to take a roll call. Councilor Morabito?
Here.
Councilor Rizzo? Here. Councilor Patch is absent. Madam President is here. Oh, thank you. And although Charles is not in the chamber at the moment, I'm told he's here within the city hall. Councilor Zambuto is present. We have a quorum. Also within the council chambers, Councilor Guarnaso, Keefe, McKenna, and as I said previously, the council president. What I'd like to start off with at first is the Suffolk Downs Overlay District. If Mr. O'Brien and his group would like to come and present to the
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I'm not sure I'll do a long presentation tonight, if that's okay. I think I'd love to kind of get to people's questions if I could. There are a few things I'd love to say at the outset, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Okay, great. You know who we are at this point. I think I was at the Chamber of Commerce last week, and a few of the councilors told me that they could give this presentation themselves, I think. So I'm going to skip a lot of these pieces and just get into the master plan portion and try and take up a topic that may have come up, I think, last time around. So I think people know that our objective here is to create a mixed-use project that can be a great place where people will live and work, right? And so as we've thought that through, as I skip through a lot of these slides here and get to the master plan portion, as we've thought that through, you know, the key things I think we've tried to make clear to people right from the very beginning is it needs to be a place that people will live first, and then you can build a commercial presence from that. That's really the key part that I think we've tried to make clear to people. So this is, as people know, a 161-acre site. It will take us 20 years to build this out. It'll take a long time for us to build this out. So when we talk about the number of units of housing, when we talk about the different pieces that are part of this plan, it will take us 20 years. This isn't something that's going to show up tomorrow. It's 59 acres, I think it is, in the city of Revere. So that means that we are talking about a project that even if there's 2,800 units of housing over the span of 20 years, those 28 units of housing break down on a per acre basis on a less units per acre than really most other new developments that are being proposed elsewhere in the city. But most importantly for us, that I think I wanted to kind of emphasize is when we look at the program here, this is the general program for the site, so 16.5 million square feet across the entire site. But most importantly, what I really wanted to focus on with people is the sense that within the city of Revere, okay, we're proposing that there would be 2.9 million square feet of commercial office and 2.9 million square feet of residential. So from the beginning, one of the things that has been made clear to us by just about every elected official that we've met in the city of Revere is they wanted 50% residential and 50% commercial. Really important to have that happen. We looked at this and said, okay, the commercial can be at least 2.9 million square feet. We could do more, by the way, if good things happen along the way. The residential can be no more than 2.9 million square feet, so it could be less, obviously. But The point I'm trying to make on this slide, though, I think if I could linger on it for one moment, in addition to the fact that it will take us 20 years to play this out, what I really wanted to focus on here is the fact that there's 2.9 million square feet proposed for the city of Revere. I'm not aware of any other proposal in any recent times, I think, in Revere that would propose this much commercial office space. It's a significant amount of commercial office space. It's a big risk for us. It's an untested market, to say the least, right? I mean, I think, and you folks would tell me differently if things were different, but I believe that there are really no other proposals of any size for commercial office like this in Revere. There may, yes, sir.
If I may, the only other project that I recall would be Waterfront Square, in which Frank could correct me on, I believe was a promise of 1 million square feet of, it was 100,000? It was 100,000 square feet of, commercial space, which hasn't arrived yet.
Hasn't happened, right? So my point, Mr. Chairman, is this. We bought this site with the understanding and the plan, frankly, that we could create a mixed-use district. We've done this work for 25 years. We know what it takes to make a commercial office building work. Up until the most recent 7 or 8 years or so, I would say it would be really hard. It would kind of be a pie-in-the-sky effort for us to say that this kind of commercial office space could get built in this portion of Revere. It would be really hard to do. But the one thing that we've witnessed, that I've said a couple times, is the one thing that's changed in the greater Boston market is that office users are willing to locate in places that are less predictable than they were 10 years ago. So it's less true that office users say, we want to be in downtown Boston. It's less true that office users say that they want to be in Kendall Square in Cambridge. What is true these days is what office users are trying to do is they're trying to create spaces that will make it possible for them to attract, hire, and keep the brightest minds in the business, whatever business that they're in. And what those people are doing, what those young people are doing is they're migrating toward places where they can live and where they can shop and have a meal. That's the most important thing. That's the building block. The Amazon thing, which I've started to say, this is kind of the analogy I've tried to use on Amazon more recently, is to me the Amazon piece is a little bit like having your dessert before you have to eat your vegetables, right? When I talk about this, about trying to create this a great place to live and a great place to enjoy a meal, okay, that's hard work. It takes a lot of time for us and a lot of effort for us to get the right retail and mix in place. And the retail is probably going to be something that won't be a big moneymaker for any of us, frankly. The retail needs to be a table setter to make it possible for us to get this thing popular in people's minds so that they'll think to go have a meal there or whatever. Once we do that, and I've said this, I think, since the very first that we started on this project, once we make it a great place to live, then we have a shot at commercial office tenants. That's the key thing. So when we say 50-50, we mean 50-50, and we're willing to agree in zoning and a variety of other documents to make sure that we're held to that account. So we'll work with you to make sure that happens. But when we say that, we are telling you honestly, I think you've gotten to know me. I'm a pretty direct person. We've told you honestly, we have to make it a great place to live first, then we can make the office work. So when people say, hey, there's this many units of housing, or there's this or that or whatever, for us, we say, well, yes, it's going to take a long time for those pieces to fall in place, maybe 20 years. And we need those pieces in place to get to the office. There's nobody else in Revere that's coming in to propose this much office. We embrace it. We want to make it work. But we'd be dishonest with you if we didn't tell you the hard work that's necessary to first make it a great place to live. So that's the key thing I wanted to start off with. I'm happy to talk about heights, but I don't think that was as big an issue because we've worked so hard to kind of shape the heights to make it work in Councilor McKenna's district and Councilor Novochesky's district as well. So I'm happy to talk about those issues as well. But I thought I'd maybe pause a little bit and just see if people have questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Anybody from the committee first? And anybody from the council? Well, I actually have several questions. Sure. And one of the issues is that you're bringing up is, make sure that I'm here, actually. Sorry about that. But one of the questions that I have, and I think it's important to ask, is why wouldn't you utilize the height that you have in Revere? My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you have greater height ability in Revere than you do in East Boston because of the flight path.
I think we've maxed out the height in accordance with the flight path so far.
So you're at 200 feet, I believe? Or,
Yes, correct. In the back portion of the site, in the right-hand corner
Okay.
of
Towards the
this.
Beachmont section, down by where the barns
Actually,
are.
more closer to Councilor Novochesky's district, I think he would say, closer to the furthest corner by behind where the Stop and Shop and the Target store
Okay, so
located.
towards that end, all
Yes,
right.
correct. But we also tried to shape it, I think, there are neighbors that exist there today, right? So we've tried to shape it to kind of carve it back a little bit so it's not a wall of buildings that are right up against Winthrop Ave.
All right. At the end of the day, though, the other issue is with such density that you're talking just about 2,900 units, and you're talking about developing it over a 20-year period. You're not going to be developing over a 20-year period because you're going to have to put these out front immediately in order to develop.
Yeah, the first phase would have to be residential. That's correct.
This is the part that's going to be the hardest for the people of Revere because it's going to have the greatest impact on our school. It's going to have the greatest impact on our infrastructure, which obviously you have to fix. The one thing that you can't fix, and I actually point to our state delegation for not doing it, is when we have, and this is just commentary, so please bear with me, is we're now going to incur an area, and I say an area meaning East Boston and Revere, because we have to take that into account because it's obviously bordering 145 and actually affects every interchange within the eastern part of our city. That you're going to have close to, 10,000 units there, and there is no change in the modal operation within the region. There's been nothing, whereas when they were talking about doing the casino there, they were talking about major overhaul within the Boardman Street area and all the way up north to the configuration, I believe, to Copeland Circle and so forth. So you're now adding a greater amount of traffic with these 10,000 units at the end of the day within a 20-year period, yet there's no solution at the state level. This is going to have a great impact on us. So what mitigation factors do you have in order to circumvent these issues, considering it's, quite frankly, if I'm not mistaken, almost $100 million that they were talking about with the casino, and obviously other people here know better than I do regarding the total cost. What are you going to do for the city as far as mitigation for that total issue?
Sure. There's two pieces in your question, Mr. Chairman, if I could. The first piece, you mentioned school children. So in our first phase, which would be mostly rental apartments, could be condominiums as well, if we can make that work financing-wise, we'd be happy to present a great deal of material to kind of walk through why there's very little in the way of school children that end up moving into these units. But that could be a separate issue.
With all due respect, and I understand what you're saying, I went through this with Roseland Property. First, they said that they weren't going to have any children. Then they started building parks. Now they're up to 3 parks, and I know how a multitude of children up there, which is fine. I have 2 kids myself. You do yourself. So,
yeah, I don't know the Roseland people. I mean, if you'd like, that could be a separate piece. On the infrastructure, if I could, the infrastructure, we do have, I mean, in our filing, we've scoped out for you what we believe would be a variety of pieces of infrastructure that would need to get built. You are right that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts would need to be involved with us, both in terms of the rapid transit and the improvements on the Blue Line, as well as the improvements on 1A. We actually just spent, at the end of last week, with the city team going through a whole long and a very extensive process of understanding the intersections that they want us to study. So we'll be studying how many intersections when all said and done? Almost 40 intersections, which we'll do. So we're, to be clear, in terms of where we are right now, so we filed in the beginning of December a notice of intent with the city of Revere, that we intended to file our initial piece, which is the zoning overlay district. We did that in January, and then we're in the midst of that process with you, and then we'll begin a PUD process. We're also separately in the midst of a long process with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through the MEPA process. That process involves a variety of scopes that were given to us, including from MassDOT, of intersections that they'd like us to study. So the combination of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the City of Boston, and the City of Revere has given us instructions to study 40 different intersections. At the end of the day, that will produce the mitigation plan for us. So there could be improvements on Boardman Street and...
But respectfully, you're talking about intersections, it's pretty much at that point signalization That's my understanding.
Part of it might be signalization, part of it might be adding some lanes here and there, turning lanes and the like.
All right.
There's a variety of different ways that the intersections can be improved. My point is it's off-site, as you say. We build all the roads and parks on-site, so
Right.
that's a very significant expense on our side. You know, as you point out, we'll want to be working with the Commonwealth to try and get the Commonwealth's aid as best we can. We're not a casino. We're a mixed-use development, obviously.
So obviously I'll have to speak to the mayor about engaging our state delegation and those within the state that can
State delegation.
assist you with that.
Wonderful.
and
Yeah, we've spent
obviously the
a
city.
lot of time with the state delegation. They've been wonderful with us, really thinking about it, you know, with us, thoughtful, giving us comments, thoughts back. We've also spent a lot of time with the MassDOT staff. We know MassDOT and the MBTA team very well. Every project that we work on involves a significant amount of involvement with MassDOT, so they know us very well as well.
Thank you. I believe Council McKenna would like to say something.
And I just would like to add, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to add that Tom O'Brien and Dino, we sat down many times down in Donley Square, and we looked at the problems that Donley Square is facing. And Donley Square, we all know, is broken. And he did commit to, you know, trying to help fix the problems that are down there. So we have talked about Donley Square in the past, and I just wanted to add that feature. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, a detail, you know, from some of our conversations, just to kind of give this sense too. You know that as you come down Winthrop Avenue toward Beachmont Station, the buses that kind of go to drop people off, they have no turnoff there, right? So the buses stop to let people off, which backs up the traffic, which means that people are trying to make a right onto Bennington at that point in the mornings. It's a mess, right? So our proposal is to acquire at a fair price the Beachmont roast beef property that's located there. We don't want to build anything there. We think it can be a great civic plaza, and it can be a turnoff for the buses, which should improve that traffic. So we're willing to spend money to make these pieces work better, that's for sure. And we'll do that in conjunction with you, the state delegation, and the MassDOT people.
Councilor Zambudo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a bit puzzled by your comment, multitude of students. Can you define that for me at Roseland?
Well, I can tell you that my children have well over 20 friends up there that they play basketball with. They go both to
My
public and private
understanding
schools.
was it was around 20 students total after the whole build-out, so...
That's incorrect, but I'm not going to even, I'm not going to debate the
I
issue
want to
with
know
you.
what multitude means.
Point of
That's what I'm
information.
trying to find out here.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Perhaps the ward council can help me with this. Thank you.
Well, the last time I spoke to the superintendent of schools, which was Paul Dakin at that time, that was 4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, he had quoted close to 100 children.
And I checked that, and it was never true. And
How-
with all due respect
okay.
to the former superintendent, he was crying wolf on the students at that property for years, and every time we looked into it, it was in the range of 20 students. So
I don't know how you could check it concerning-
I just want to know what multitude is,
Well,
because when I hear things thrown around that don't have factual evidence to back it up, I get concerned.
So what is your source? What is your source? 1 second, Charlie. What is your source?
My
What is your
source
for this
was all the
information, considering you don't
investigating I
have
did over the years.
You have no inference. I'm talking to the superintendent who actually has...
You're talking to a superintendent who for years
Okay, thank
told
you.
me we were going to
Charlie.
be buried with students, and every time we investigated that, it was not true. So that's my source. Now,
Okay.
your source, you're using the same source,
superintendent.
only you're
Thank you.
extrapolating it a different way
Okay,
into
thank you.
multitude of students.
Thank you.
I disagree with the term multitude.
Very good, thank you.
You
Charlie?
know, I really don't want to get into this because we're talking about Suffolk Downs, but that statement is not true, 100 kids. I've checked every year up there, and the most they ever had was under 40 kids there. Now, Malden might be a different situation, but their kids go to Malden schools, because there's only been 2 buildings built in Revere, and that was many, haven't built in many years. But they've been building up in Malden, and the first building that they put up there was supposed to be condos, so some of them had 2, 3 bedrooms, and they couldn't sell the condos, so they made them apartments. And Roseland doesn't even own that building no more. So, there's never been, and most of the kids that do live in the Revere buildings are workers' kids that get the apartment for minimum You don't pay.
Well,
But I know, and I've talked to the truant officers and checked, and I don't know where you get that figure of 100.
Well, like I said, I got it from Paul Dakin, so I
Well,
I
I'm
trust Paul
sorry, but I
Dakin.
honestly doubt that, because I talked to Dakin too, and.
Well, obviously, we're hearing two different things, but that said, that's not this project, but you have to take it into consideration. Same thing with 250 Broadway, that we're told that we weren't going to have any kids down there too. But that's another story in itself. No one can tell anybody how anybody's going to reproduce, especially when you have 3,000 units. And if anybody can tell me that, that's you know, a new thing for me. But everybody's going to have their opinion. Councilor Rizzo?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, Tom, you probably got where I was coming from last meeting, and I just have grave concerns. Having moved around the city and talked to people over the last few years, there is a real challenge out there with our existing residents with respect to traffic. We have kids at the high school right now that are being taught in what was once closets. We have to figure out where we're going to find funding for a new high school, or we may lose accreditation at some point. There's a lot of concerns I have just with what's coming up out of the ground right now with respect to residential. The commercial part of it, if you were to come to Revere and say, hey, we want to start off with an office building, we want to start off here, but we've been told for years and years that if we put up more residential, we'll get the commercial. We put up more residential, we'll get the commercial. And we keep putting up more residential, but we really haven't seen the commercial. And now, to look, I was just doing, you know, we talked about the 3,000 units, Mr. Chairman, in Revere, but I think you might have alluded to it. There's another 5 or 6 or 7,000 going up in Boston, and unless we're going to put a fence up at the end of Revere, there's a potential for them to use the infrastructure here in Revere as well, our streets and so on. And, you know, as I started thinking about that, I said there could, I mean, if you just took one person living in every unit, which we know it's not going to be just one in every unit, this would make, and I just had to look, for some reason, I was saying to myself, that is a huge piece of property. It's a huge residential development. It would put Suffolk Downs in the top, close to top 100 cities and towns in all of Massachusetts based on population. I mean, it's just a huge project that we're looking at, and you know, I know that we all want to see something get developed there. We don't want the horse barns there, and I know you don't, and we don't want to see. I mean, as much as I would like to see the racetrack there, I've been a real, I have real fond memories of the track, but that has come and gone. You know, the notion of putting some commercial development there and a much scaled back residential portion, at least in the early phases, I think is something that I would be looking for. I mean, when you think about, we just had a major storm last week. We have people, again, our existing residents that live here now, that had their cars floating away, that had their belongings floating away. I mean, how are we going to handle another, and we haven't even put online the hundreds of units at Shaw's right across the street from where you guys are proposing 3,000. We haven't even brought that online yet. I mean, how's that going to impact, you know, concerns surrounding flooding, surrounding schools? Because even if there's 20, you know, as Councilor Zambudo said, and you know, I'm not sure which one said, but, you know, if there's 20 and you scale that up to, you know, the number of units being proposed here and the number of units being proposed at Overlook Ridge, I mean, you're looking at another 100 kids. You know, I mean, it's just a lot for me to take in. You talked a little bit about studying some intersections, but again, we don't have that information yet. When we were going forward, and I know I've brought this up in the past, talked about host community agreements, and maybe that's the wrong terminology for what we could deal with, you know, going forward here, but, you know, the guarantees to me are just important, you know, and you know, to hope, you know, you know, just what you said earlier. You said, we got to build the residential so we have a shot at the commercial. Like, I don't want a shot at the commercial. I want to know that there's commercial development coming. I want to, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I mean, I have a huge amount of respect for your firm, and I've done an awful lot of, we've had a couple conversations, and I have, I've done what I feel as though my due diligence with respect to, your company, and look, we're dealing with a tremendous company, and I appreciate that, but because we're dealing with a tremendous company doesn't necessarily mean that, the company comes in and just says, this is what we're going to do, and that's the end of it, because we have to have, the people that live in the city right now, the 53 or 55,000 that we have documented here right now, they're entitled to a certain quality of life. And if we don't stand up for them here as city councilors, I'm not sure who is. All I'm looking for is some certainties. And you said it's over a 20-year period. Great. Well, let's talk about how this is going to phase in over 20 years. We're not going to wake up next Thursday and have 3,000 units up, sitting there. So, I just don't want to develop for development's sake. I don't think that makes for a stronger community. I don't think it makes for a better community. I think good planning does. I think in some cases redevelopment does. But when you look, there was a young guy up here last week that talked about Market Street. There's 180 units up there. Even Assembly Row, which is about the same size as that site, I think they've got about 1,300. I mean, as I say, this has nothing to do with the development firm itself. And I respect, by the way, just so my colleagues know, I respect their opinions. I hope they respect mine. Everyone's in, we're all one vote up here, so I would never put somebody down for supporting a project, and I would hope that I'm not looked upon as somebody that's, trying to be, somebody that's an obstructionist, because that's not my goal here. But my goal is to protect the city. And if we can come up with something, at the end of the day, Tom, you might say, I don't need your vote. I got 10 more votes, so good luck to you. If that's, I'm not sure where my colleagues are all going to come down on this, but at least while I'm here as one city councilor, I would like to, appeal to my colleagues so that we can get some assurances and we can get some timetables, and we do know that the infrastructure can handle what we're already doing here in the city, excluding what you're proposing over there. Because like I say, it's going to be a massive project that at the end of the day, and again, I'm not saying this disrespectfully, Tom, but at the end of the day, the truth is that everything's going to be built, and everyone here on your team is probably not going to be sitting up here in the council chambers with us thinking about what the best thing to do in Revere is. They're going to be going home, wherever home may be, and we're going to be dealing with the residents here in Revere that want to know why they're sitting. I mean, we hear it all the time up here. I'm 45 minutes in traffic. This council is prepared to vote down, or has voted down, a 140-unit building on Revere Beach because of traffic, and it's absurd. And now we're talking about 3,000 units like it's a matter of fact. And it's a little, be honest with you, it's a little mind-boggling to me, because it's a massive undertaking, especially when you factor in the Boston side. And I'm going to close, Mr. Chairman, with just one final thing. And it was just something, and I like hate. I'm not a half. I'm not a glass half empty guy. I really am not. But when we were going through the presentation last week, and I saw the plaza at Suffolk Downs and how beautiful that looked, and the shops and the restaurant and the people and the rendering, the whole thing. And when it came to Revere, we had an amphitheater that, to be honest with you, I would view almost as a necessary distraction, to be honest with you.
No, Councilor, I wanted to follow up with you on that. We showed this last time. This is the square that we're proposing at Beachmont. On the left here, what we're proposing here, that's an innovation district. It's a commercial building that we would build probably at a loss, frankly, without a tenant, because we want to try and set the table today. So that,
So which building are we looking at right now?
right in the left-hand side of that screen, right
And,
there.
and so what is that building? What is that going to consist of?
That's a
And-
commercial office building that we think can be an innovation center. So we would build it without a tenant, and the hope that we could make it a place for entrepreneurs and people with short-term need for space to come and locate there. So we'll probably have retail on the first floor, coffee shop, sandwich shop, that kind of thing. Very, very similar, if you've been to the Seaport, the way we think about it is, the Seaport was a place that really was not what it is today for a long time, right?
Sure.
And one of the things that happened was two things. Mayor Menino, at the time, decided he was going to call the Seaport the Innovation District from out of nowhere. He just started calling it the Innovation District. In addition to that, he pushed a developer to build a building like this in the middle of the Seaport, which became, it's called District Hall. And that has become a central place, and the Seaport District exploded as a result of that. Now, we don't know if we can produce the same results, but we're certainly willing to try. So what we're saying here, councilors, is we produced what we think is equally as interesting plans for both Beachmont as well as for Suffolk Downs. We call that Retail Square, Belle Isle Square. I'm sorry you missed this. We did present this last time around. But we really think of this, there's no difference. It's like, you know, it's two important pieces for us. Both these Blue Line stations are essential for us. We're going to put the same amount of investment, the same amount of time, the same amount of effort. We need these both to be great front doors. No difference between the two. Can I
Thank
do
you
a
for that
couple of other quick-
presentation, Tom. How-
Can I do a couple of other quick things? Just, I
Sure.
have a few thoughts.
Sure, absolutely.
First, can I say right off the bat, we want your vote. I mean, honestly, the reason we've come to spend some time with you and we'd like to spend more time with you is because we want your vote. So, and you ask very good questions, very thoughtful questions. These are good things. These are questions that as a responsible developer, we need to be able to answer. So if I could just kind of run through
Sure.
a couple of things. The first is just in terms of where we are in the process, I just want to be clear. What we're asking for here is this committee's recommendation and then the eventual city council's vote on a zoning overlay district that would allow us to then come back to see you with a planned urban development plan, a PUD, right? So we don't have that ability today because the zoning doesn't envision it, right? So we're asking for your ability to come back with that. The zoning will have within it the uses, commercial office, does have residential, commercial office, retail, all those pieces. It'll dictate the heights, and it'll basically dictate where the buildings will be located. Then we'll come back to you with a planned urban development plan, a PUD, and that will have very specifics in terms of building locations and phases of when we'll do certain things. So if we say to you, we want to build this building by this, in this phase, it will have within it a very specific requirement that we must build this road, this park at that time for that phase. We must build all the following pieces in terms of retail, that building. We've said up front to everybody on the mayor's staff, as well as all the city councilors that we've met, that we will commit to build that building in the first phase, that innovation center. That's not a moneymaker, I will tell you, right out the gate. But we'll build that building in the first phase. So we said we would do that.
And what is the square footage of that building?
I think that's about 40 to 60,000 square feet, something like that. 48,000 square feet. And we think of it as, we want it to be a well-designed, beautiful building. We want that to stand the test of time. This isn't we're not throwing this up to kind of try and make it work. And I will tell you, I don't want to be public about this if I could, but we've started to have conversations with the kinds of people who can help us manage that for short-term office space, right? The kinds of entrepreneurial entities that are out there talking to people, could help us with that right now. So we've started already to try and make that building a success. If I could just do a couple other quick points. Sure. I sat here the other night when the full city council was here, and I was saddened to not be able to get back up here because it was a missed opportunity to have this discussion. The assessors team presented first, and there was a tremendous amount of discussion about how much the tax burden falls upon homeowners in Revere. And it's true, right? Revere is much like most of the 365 cities and towns in Massachusetts, in that most of the property taxes paid in those cities and towns are paid by homeowners. There's a select few cities that have enough commercial space to lift that burden off of homeowners. So if you live in Boston, I guarantee you that your tax rate for a homeowner is less than your tax rate, even though your assessed value of your house is less, is more in Boston than it is in Revere. So I don't know. I haven't been able to do the back and forth, but way cheaper in Boston from a tax perspective to live because there's commercial office space in Boston. That's true about the communities along 128. If you go from Lexington to Waltham to all those different pieces, that's true because they have office space. So what Revere needs is Revere needs office space. You get, as you know, I mean, you've sat as the chief executive. You get not only a better rate from the commercial office space, in the beginning, when you add new space, you get a far better rate even at the new space, right? I'm not a tax expert, but I will tell you, adding commercial office space is a huge benefit. Revere must have it, has to have it. But I would be not honest with you if I didn't also tell you this. We started working on North Point, which is the old rail yard in East Cambridge, in 2010. We bought that site in August of 2010. It was a site very much like Suffolk Downs. It was a site that had, there's a Green Line station right there. Leechmere Station is right there. We had an Orange Line station. The Bunker Hill Station is right there. Both were right there. It was a site that hadn't had much in the way of development. It was an old rail yard. It was a site that, was a place that we had put in place a plan. We were kind of ready to move forward. We permitted that site for 5.5 million square feet. About 2 million square feet of that was commercial office, and the rest was residential. Cambridge wanted more residential than office. We wanted to build an office building in the worst way. And frankly, the people we bought it for the 10 years before we were even on it, they wanted to build an office building. So over a span of probably 17 years, we begged people. We made pitches to State Street. We pitched, who else? Can you remember? We pitched Blue Cross Blue Shield. Who else? I can't even think of it. 20 companies. Ironwood. I have a shelf of pitches I made to companies. Now, this is Cambridge, okay, on a Green Line and an Orange Line, okay? We built a residential building. We completed that residential building in 2015. Now, there's an office building going up there right now with a new investor, a new group, and frankly, they'll get a tenant on that. And I think, frankly, they feel enough good things going on that, they'll build another office building as well. So I would be dishonest with you if I looked at you and said, it is possible for us to bring an office tenant out here with that site, though, even if I demolished the horse barns, even if I took the fence down, even if I took all those pieces out, and it were just the dirt, okay? I'm telling you, I've been doing this for 25 years. I don't think I can get an office tenant. I just can't. But if you will allow me to build a first phase with retail, with that innovation building, and with, call it 900 units or so of housing, okay, in the first phase, if you will allow me to do that, I'm telling you, we will move heaven and earth to bring an office tenant to this site. We will make sure that we do that. And I will tell you, as long as I'm alive, I'll be sitting here, I'll be the one sitting here doing this stuff. And our intention is to build an office building. That's what we'll be doing.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to, I know I said I would close, but now that Mr. O'Brien has come back, I just have some follow-up to that, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Of course.
So you had just mentioned if you allow us to start off with 900 units and allow, that's still an awful lot of units,
It
but
is.
it's a far cry from 3,000.
Yes.
So we're going in the right direction in my mind.
Yeah, but we need the right to build, we're not saying 3,000, by the way, it's about 2,800. But we need the right to build the 2,800 over the span of that period of time.
So is this overlay district going to automatically grant you that authority too?
No, we're going to come back for a PUD with you, so the zoning will kind of line up the pieces, but the PUD will be the specifics that will allow us to do that.
So what is it, if I could just direct, Frank, maybe you can answer this, or Paul or Bob, one of yous. If this overlay district is approved, what can the developer do by right at that point?
Well, the uses are all outlined in the overlay district, what he can and cannot do. The heights are outlined in the overlay district, what his maximums are. His setbacks are outlined, and buffer zones are outlined in the overlay district. Although the city council, through your regulatory authority, has the authority to impose conditions and safeguards through the special permit process to shrink those maximums and minimums. So you have great leverage to impose safeguards and limitations on this development through the special permit process.
So what type of limit, in other words, if this overlay district is approved, say the city council says, no, we're not happy with anything in the PUD process. We don't want, we've changed our mind. We don't want any residential. If that were the case, what rights does the developer have at that point?
well, he has to work with the city council because you're the regulatory authority. You call the shots on the number of residential units that can be built in Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3.
So he has, so that, not he, they, the company would have no rights to even one unit unless we approve it.
That's correct. That's what the Special Permit Master Plan Development, PUD, is all about, is to create that envelope and those conditions that'll be applied to this development. So the work is yet to come. This is just a precursor to a lot of work that has to take place during the PUD master plan process.
And I might add, Councilor, that the overlay district actually, the overlay district before you calls for precisely that process. It is referenced in the zoning that a PUD process is required, and it's a master plan process that will look at the development from beginning to end. It will be done, as you suggested, in phases, so that we know what has to be done and when to meet the requirements of the zoning. The zoning are your greatest guarantee, but the PUD process will say what the developer can do, what they actually will do, and that needs to be approved through the PUD special permit.
So all we're doing, if this is approved, is approving uses that would be allowed, but with no specific numbers, we're just approving, basically it's just a zoning change, correct?
That's correct, and keep in mind that the current zoning on this parcel calls for housing to be a forbidden use, which means they could not even come forward with a PUD that reflects the mixed-use development plan that Tom has been talking about from the beginning, that was reflected in the Amazon proposal, et cetera. So this is the essential first step to allow the development process to proceed.
So just final time, just because I need to understand it. So the overlay district is approved, now housing is allowed. It's currently not allowed because of, same thing at Wonderland, I would imagine.
That's correct.
So no housing is currently allowed. This overlay district now allows for housing, but it does not say you can build up to, okay, so we have height restrictions. Well, I want to come in and I want to build, a 10-story because it's allowed 10-story here. It's not by right at that point? They don't have rights to go up to 10 stories or
Councilor
rights
Rizzo.
to go up to?
May I
It's
interject?
allowed by right, but it still requires approval
May
through the PUD process.
May I interject? So, Dan, I think what's happening here is because of the current zoning, the way that it's written, doesn't allow for any type of housing there. They're doing an overlay district, which will say that we will allow a special permit process to take place in order to allow housing. So, basically, it's changing the zoning to allow a special permit process within the PUD. Does that sound about right, guys?
That is correct, and I must say it gets down
So
to...
they have to come back to us.
So under the
Issues
table
like-
of uses, it is not allowed, it is by special permit.
Correct.
Okay.
And I must say, we will also get into a level of detail that deals on the residential side, not only the quantity of housing, but the quality of housing. For example, housing for the elderly is not likely to impact the schools in the way that family-based housing would. Those are the kinds of discussions that will take place in the PUD process and where specific commitments will be made, not just to the quantity, but to the quality of housing.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien, appreciate it.
I believe Council Morbido has a question, Mr. O'Brien? 1 second, sir. Yes.
So, I know, Mr. O'Brien, I know I spoke to you on several occasions. Now, Phase 1, how long would you anticipate Phase 1 to be? So let me get this straight. So Phase 1 would be an innovation center along with about 900 units on the Revere side?
Approximately, we're still, I mean,
Around,
because we're not in the special permit process, I can't, say specifically what it is, but that's generally what we think is necessary in order to set the table to make it possible for commercial.
So what is usually the anticipated time in a phase? So
It takes you
phase,
about 20, it'll take us, if we get through this process with the council, let's say this year, it'll take us probably 12 months to complete the design for those buildings. So we're would hope to begin the buildings as fast as possible, but probably, somewhere in 2019, we would begin those buildings. It takes about 24 months to build the buildings, 22 to 24 months.
And I anticipate with high hopes that there'll be some kind of condo complex in that.
If we can finance it, if we can make it work in the market, we'd love to sell condos, yes.
Thank you.
Folks, I think I'm just going to let one person from the audience, Tony, after you, Tony, go ahead. Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At last council meeting, I tried to, I guess I failed. I tried to clear up the fact that we were voting on an overlay district and we were getting into numbers that were really not relevant to this proposal here. And I think I clearly stated that everything was in a special permit process after the overlay district was voted on. So I just want to kind of clear up that we are voting on an overlay district for this parcel. And I'm hoping we're going to do that tonight at the regular council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I let you speak, sir, just give me 1 second. Mr. O'Brien, I just want to reiterate, I want to hear what you said. You said 40,000 to 60,000 square foot?
Yeah, I think, Doug, correct, I had it 40,000, I think it's 48?
No, it's between 40 and 80,000 square feet. Up to 80,000 square feet.
And you're talking, that's probably, what, just around about a $50 million build-out for a building of that nature?
Yeah, at least, yeah.
So this is, folks, I want you to understand this, and as much as I have my reserves, and I make my commentary regarding schools and things, I want people to know this. This is the first project in the city's history that I know of, and Frank, you can correct me, in which a developer is willing to sink $50 million into a process in hoping that they're going to bring somebody to Revere to develop Suffolk Downs into something magical, so to speak. That's a lot of hope, sir.
Well, I've let these guys are anxious. We've seen it happen, right? So we.
Oh, I see what happened over at Leechmere. I mean, I know what you did there.
Yeah,
I have no questions about it.
We're fortunate in that we have an investor group that's willing to believe in us, but anyway, these guys are anxious.
Mr. Chairman, just one other clarification. Office buildings are not the only form of commercial development that will take place here. There are retail, restaurant, laboratory space, and so forth. Retail and restaurants certainly will be part of the first phase, even though a major office building beyond the Innovation Center might not be. So understand that commercial is a much broader definition than just office building.
So, Mr. Chairman, one more thing, just for clarification, too. The residential buildings would be mixed-use buildings, so they would be residential over retail. So the retail would probably be up to 75,000 square feet of ground floor retail as well, in addition to the Innovation Center. So there are definitely commercial uses that we're proposing within it. And we'll be also exploring the possibility of a hotel as well in the early phase as well. So again, it wasn't meant to be 900 standalone units with nothing else around it. It was really meant to really create that retail square, that district from our perspective, which is really what's meant to jumpstart this part at Beachmont. So we're really excited about those integration uses.
Understood. And gentlemen, I'm going to have to cut short. I'm going to have this young man in the audience come and speak to us, and then after that, I have to attend to C-1802. And Attorney Simeone, I apologize for the breadth of time. Go ahead, sir.
Chairman, in all due respect to Mr. O'Brien, Mr. O'Brien's a dreamer. He's dreaming. Good dreams, but they're dreams.
You are, sir? I'm sorry. Your name and address, sir?
Patrick Catrone. I'm living in Lynn now. I used to live at Suffolk Downs, Orion Avenue. I'll read that to you now. I talked to Mr. Zawinski in the planning board in Boston. He told me to write him a letter pertaining to what I was talking about. Enclosed, you will find what you asked for concerning Suffolk Downs. I was born across the street from Suffolk Downs Racetrack. Everything I write can be verified. It is my opinion that Suffolk Downs property will be the last place for the proposed project. Patrick Catrone, and that's my name.
Thank you, sir. If you could submit that, I'll be more than happy to take it. Thank you.
I'll give it to you.
Excellent.
No, I'll give all to you at once. I was born across the street from Suffolk Downs Racetrack at 19 Seaview Avenue in East Boston, up in the hill. There were no homes. It was just my house and the racetrack down below.
Okay.
It is my opinion, based upon my personal experience, that Suffolk Downs property should be the last place for the proposed project. The last place. First of all, Suffolk Downs was built on wetland. Governor Curley used all his influence and power to bend and break the rules to build the track.
Sir,
If you-
I'm sorry, I do have to ask you for brevity's sake that we take the written commentary. I do have somebody else that I have to get to. I said that earlier. I do apologize. You're welcome to come back next week and
Why should I come back next week if I'm standing here now?
well, frankly, sir, we're cut for
By the way,
time.
this is only one page.
Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, first of all, Suffolk Downs was built on wetland. Governor Curley used all his influence and power to bend and break the rules and build the track. A few years later, he was convicted of a variety of charges and went to jail. One must understand the period. It was 1935, during the middle of the Depression. Unemployment was running 20% high. Personally, I had two uncles that worked at the track, 10 hours a day for $5. They were glad to get it. There was no money around. Years later, my Uncle Fred told me that they used asbestos in the walls and on the pipes. At the time, nobody knew what the danger of asbestos was. Today, it's outlawed all over the world, and it's the second biggest cause of cancer after smoking. My uncle told me that they trucked in tons of sand from Revere Beach to cover the wetland that is now the grandstand. They used gravel and cement to cover the floor. In 1969, after repaving the floor many times, they decided to tear it up floor and at the north end of the grandstand and laid an asbestos mesh. I asked one of the workers what that was, and he said it's a mesh that allows the water to flow through. He said it would hopefully keep the ocean water running through. However, it didn't work, and the floors are now worse than ever. Nobody will stop the tide from coming in. With increased global warming, building at Suffolk Downs is inadvisable due to environmental, health, and eventual fiscal concerns. In 1943, and I was right there, watching it, one of the tanks had a major leak. It was in the month of October. Suffolk Downs was closed, and at least 10 fire trucks were on the site. I could see the disaster from my house. The firemen worked 24 hours a day for a month to clean up the oil. The fear was fire. In the mid-40s, my friends and I used to walk to Revere Beach through Suffolk Downs, down the main road, when the track was closed. One day we noticed a small pickup truck opposite the grandstand. There was a man in there with a shovel and sand on the truck. We thought he was cleaning out water. He told us it was oil that leaked from the tanks. In our brief conversation, he said they all leak because they are old and in bad shape. The parking lots are wetland that have been filled in. Most of the trees that border the oil tanks are dead. The dangers working on this project are clear. In addition, the demolition of Wonderland Dog Track was ordered to stop because of the huge danger of asbestos. They stopped construction 2 months ago. Suffolk Downs could never be built without tearing down the grandstand. That's impossible. At the meeting the other night, Mr. O'Brien said eventually the oil tanks would go. I don't know where they're going to go. There's 41 tanks there, sky high, filled with oil. You could move the Empire State Building from Manhattan to Revere before you could do that. That's impossible. But he said it. I wondered where they were going to go. He also said the grandstand would go after a later date. Tearing down the grandstand is going to be a major problem. The environmentalists will have a lot to say, and the people at Waldemar Avenue will protest the asbestos problem. Poppy Cavalieri, who lived next door to me at Orient Avenue up in the hill, was an elderly man. He told us a lot of stories. He said they used to go swimming on Waldemar Avenue and Orient Avenue down the bottom of the hill. I said, what happened to all the water? He said they filled it in so the streetcars could run into Suffolk Downs.
Sir,
Finally,
I do need
last paragraph.
No, I need to stop you right there. I'm sorry. Time's running out for this committee meeting. I have to, I actually,
Finally, it's inconceivable that the day would come, the age of our knowledge of climate change and the understanding of environmental contamination municipality would build on such an unsuitable wetland. Therefore, I'm requiring the proposed development. If they start tearing down Suffolk Downs with all the asbestos and all, there'll be all kinds of cancer all through the city. It's built on wetland. The hotels he proposes cannot be built. That's impossible. It's all water. Okay, thank you very much. I can see that you're very interested in what I said. But when they start building it, you'll find out they can't build it, and they'll be stopped. You want to make a copy of this, miss?
Yes, I'll take it as well. Thank you, sir.
thank you, sir. Attorney Simeoni, if,
Oh, I thought we were going.
with that said, Mr. O'Brien, I don't believe there's anything else to be said at this moment. We'll adjourn your part of the meeting and meet up next week. I'll speak to the other Mr. O'Brien, and we'll confer as to how to best approach this. Thank you, gentlemen. Attorney Simeoni, I'd like to quickly address C-1802, and I'm going to unfortunately have to put the other two issues that you have before us on the back burner.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you could take the Achara development and keep that in committee, along with the 14 Hutchison for the Tabernacle, and keep that in committee. And my expectation on the latter is the city will issue me a letter, and that I'll be withdrawing the latter, and I'll be continuing to work on the other one. So that leaves me before you with just the item dealing with 225 Broadway Revere.
And did you bring the conditions with you?
I did.
And could you give them to the clerk?
Clerk already has
Oh, you just want to read them in the record? Okay, I got you. Go ahead, Counselor.
So, as this body is well aware, having had 10 members actually show up at the small site at 225 Broadway, we're seeking a special permit to modify a non-conforming structure, existing structure being 1,543 square feet. We're adding a second floor and essentially asking that the new structure be 4,700 square feet. We have made some designs and have shown you those designs, which ultimately will take care of several of the problems in the past. We're going to have everything within the confines of the building, such as the coolers. We'll have a feature of glass enclosures on the outside, and we'll be keeping trash dumpsters within the structure. The Site Plan Review Committee went through a variety of conditions, having many coming from the ward councilman, and so I'd probably like to get to that issue, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
All right, so the Plan Review Committee stated that they would like the council to consider the following as conditions with the special permit. One is the demolition permit must be approved by the Board of Health, the Fire Department, and the Public Works Department, and that there shall be baiting 4 weeks prior to any demolition throughout the construction of this particular structure, which is double the amount of time presently under the regulations. Dust control measures shall be placed by the contractor throughout the demolition and removal process, and a fire watch shall be in place throughout the demolition process by the Revere Fire Department. Construction shall not be started until prior to 8 a.m., and there should be no residential units within the structure. There should be no windows in the rear elevation, and there shall be a landscape buffer installed between the abutting residential property and the building. There shall be no trash stored on exterior of the building, so there'll be no trash receptacles or anything outside this particular structure. All trash shall be stored within a receptacle inside the building and to be picked up at least 3 times a week. There should be no deliveries prior to 10 a.m. and after 4 p.m. No product shall be put on the floor, and all product in the basement shall be on shall be stored on, what do they call, pallets, yeah. Although they don't use pallets. There shall be no product displayed in the windows. There shall be no more than 3 temporary window signs, and all window signs shall not be covered more than 10% of the glass area. All rooftop and mechanical units shall include baffles and be screened from view from abutting residential properties. The building shall be fully sprinkled if there's no separation between the interior dumpster and the doorway, and the plans are to be reviewed by the fire department. Also, as type of mitigation, there shall be new concrete sidewalks installed along the full frontage of the property along Cheever Street and Broadway, as well as upgrading the sewer and water services that serve the property. The presentation last time was rather detailed. I think the council knows the project well, and I would ask that the council consider favorably, the subcommittee favorably recommending to the full body the award of the special permit to modify this non-conforming structure.
Anybody have any questions? Councilor McKenna first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, Larry, Attorney Simeoni, that everything we've asked for, you've complied, so I'm very happy with everything that I've asked for and will get, so.
It's through you, Mr. Chairman,
Go
to
ahead.
the ward councilman. Except for one thing, after talking with my clients, after having you asked for, the building will not be at 1 foot 6 inches in the rear. It will be pushed up to 3 feet, so that surrounding the building, there'll be 3 feet of landscaped area. And that didn't get into the site plan and will need to be in the council vote. So the setback will be
Attorney Simeoni, is that for the
Rear
abutters
set-
at Cheever Street in order to maintain a 3-foot buffer zone for them?
Yes, exactly, the Ropers.
Any other councilors? Sir, madam, would you like to come to the podium, please?
Elizabeth Roper, 7 Cheever Street. Because we're here at a zoning board, I again asked for more than 3 feet from my property. That's one of my biggest concerns, really. And maybe if there's going to be noise from air conditioner compressors, where are they going to be located? Rooftop side, where's it going to be?
Ma'am, if I could have the attorney speak on that. As far as
Through
the
you, Mr. Chairman, to Mrs. Roper, the ordinance requires that the placement of mechanical rooftop units be as far away as possible from abutting residences. So chances are it will be where it is and maybe a little closer to the corner of Cheevers and Broadway.
Well, because it's not listed on the site plan, it's not listed here at all.
It's on
I
the
don't see-
design?
It's not on the design at all, that I can see.
It's not above, the units above are not shown.
But that's the building code.
That's the ordinance.
Okay. Councilor McKenna, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Larry, can I ask you a question? So are they going to hear noise? Because one of their biggest complaints when I was, since I started as a counselor, is that they were getting inundated with noise from the refrigerator.
The refrigeration unit that is there now was added many, many years ago, so it's an old unit, number one. And two, it's completely outside. With the new structure, there'll be a cooler in the basement and a cooler on the first floor, a walk-in cooler, and both of those will be new, modern units, which are much quieter, and be totally within the building. So there'll be nothing outside the building.
So what I'm asking is, are they going to hear any noise from these compressors or that's going to be located on the roof?
My expectation, the units on the roof will also be new because it's a new building, but will also be placed farthest away from both residences, the residents on one side or the other. So can I answer that question?
Attorney
Will they
Simeoni?
hear it?
I'm gonna-
No.
I'm gonna
I-
interject.
I don't know if they'll hear it or
I
not.
think I know someone who might be able to answer that. Councilor Keefe is involved with that industry, and he knows about cold walk,
Sure.
cold storage.
Rooftop units, I mean, obviously, I would just suggest if we could add into the specifications that, like you mentioned, keeping them the furthest away from the residential areas, probably closer to the Broadway side. No one on Broadway is going to be upset if there's noise because there's no one living
Absolutely, yeah.
on that end of Broadway. And the only other, I guess, specification I would ask for is, you had mentioned the trash being totally enclosed.
It'll be totally enclosed within the structure, not to be viewed by the public.
Because currently the trash is viewable. If that was enclosed, I think that's a big win for the neighbors in the area.
And also, I think if you looked at the condition, there'll be no windows in the rear of the building, as Mrs. Roper had asked for.
And I mean, with all due respect, Mrs. Roper, and through the attorney, to the attorney, I can't see going any further back because there's a limited space there. And the lot was non-conforming to begin with, so 3 feet is not the best, but it's better than what it is right now.
Most of the building now is between 9 and 11 feet away from my house.
When I
If you
was,
look at the- if you
when
look
I
at the
was there,
plan-
it didn't actually,
Well,
the
on this-
cooler, the actual walk-in refrigerator down was abutting your property. It was right there.
That was a small piece that
Right.
was from the flower shop originally.
Right.
And
So
that's below, it's only like a couple inches over the fence line. It's a small portion. But the main building,
Yeah, when I was there, I could touch your building with my, your fence with my hand. So that's the distance from me walking out the door, touching that white fence with my hand. So whatever that distance is, that's how far it is that I can tell right now. I mean, I walked through the building myself. If anybody can tell me any different, then so be it, but that's what I
right here.
remember.
It's right here. It's 9 to 11 feet from the main building. The only part that's closest to the property line is that small cement area.
Mr. Chairman, are you going to take a vote on this and the other matter tonight, the overlay district?
Not the overlay district, but we'll take
Well,
up this
I'm
matter
proposing
tonight.
a motion to take up the overlay district.
I
this
believe,
evening.
after speaking to Bob O'Brien and speaking to them when they were here, that perhaps they would come back again. So,
Well, I'm proposing to vote it out tonight. I'm putting a motion in to vote out the overlay district this evening by the committee.
yeah, I would not want to do that.
I didn't,
Yeah, I understand that.
I was putting in a motion.
I-
I think that's the procedure.
Yeah, no, I agree. So folks, on that, there's 2 issues that I'd like to address. We have a vote on the floor for bringing out the Suffolk Downs Overlay District out of committee. We're going to do a roll call on this. This is going to be the Suffolk Downs Overlay District. Yeah, and also on the C-1802 regarding the property on 225 Broadway. The committee. And if there's any further commentary from the attorney or Mrs. Roper, anything else? Okay. On Councilor Zambuto's motion to vote Suffolk Downs Overlay District out of committee. Out of committee, yep. Councilor Marabito. He wants to vote it out favorably, yeah.
Yes.
Councilor Patch?
No.
Councilor Rizzo? No. Councilor Zambuto?
My vote is yes. The president has a vote also.
Well, I get that. Give me a second. Committee members first, then the president. That's the formality. Madam President?
Yes.
And I vote no.
Point of information here. They already left. I mean, he wants to vote on it tonight. We already told him we're not voting on it tonight.
Correct, I know that, but Councilor Zambudo just has, the need to put the motion forward, and that's fine. I'm more than happy to entertain it, even though that's not what we agreed to.
I mean, that's why
I
I'm
mean, you
voting,
heard
that's
me
why I'm
speak to
voting
him.
no.
Thank you.
I think they should be here.
They should-
The city left too.
I
Correct.
spoke to them
Everybody
as
left.
they were leaving, and I told them I was voting it out of committee.
Okay, well.
That's why I
The
did
noes
it.
have it.
What's that?
The noes have it.
No, they don't. What are you talking about?
Council Morabito, myself.
No, my Council
Councilor Patch.
Morabito was a yes. The yeses have it.
So it's a no. 3 and 3 is a no. It did not pass. Thank you. C 1802, 225 Broadway. Council Morabito? Yes. Council Patch?
This is a vote for the,
For the Broadway project.
yes.
Councilor Rizzo?
Yes.
Madam President? Councilor Zambudo?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you. That'll conclude the long and extended zoning subcommittee meeting. Thank you, Joe.